Kristen called me on Father's Day, June of 2007, to wish me happy Father's Day. And she started to cry on the phone, and I asked her what was wrong, and she said that her right ankle and right leg had swollen up and she didn't know why. And that's the journey that started for Kristen. We had probably diagnostics done for about the next 4 weeks, and they finally just diagnosed it as stage 3C, which is advanced cervical cancer caused by HPV. I can still remember when the doctors came into her room and they gave us the diagnosis that it was cancer, that everybody in the room started to cry. And Kristen asked us to leave the room, so we all of us went outside in the hospital and out in the garden and stood out there and cried. And then I got a text from Kristen, and she says, "Come on back." And it's like she'd had time to deal with what she had laying ahead of her, and she wanted us back in the room. And that's when the fight began.
I think after the 3-week hospital stay that the chemo started that next week.
Yeah, the radiation.
And radiation. She had to have a tube put in her ureter, and they couldn't tell if it was damage from radiation or if it was the cancer. And she had that procedure done 2 different times.
Multiple blood transfusions because she was bleeding internally, and that was the only way they could really solve that problem temporarily. That was a temporary thing. She never lost her spirit, her will to fight, or her faith, right up to the very end. She was actually an inspiration for the rest of us, I think, because I think in the back of your mind, you realize that she's dealing with almost a terminal cancer, but you want your child to recover. But what's going through your mind at the time is, why Kristen, why now? I'm sure any parent who's lost a child does the same thing. And so you're dealing with that. You're trying to encourage her to continue the fight, which she did a really good job of. And praying for the best outcome.
She did tell us one time that if anybody in the family had to have cancer, she was glad it was her. When they finally let us go back into the emergency room, she talked a little bit, but I don't know that she knew it was us.
Yeah, the toxins
she pulled
in her
the light.
blood.
She wanted the light pulled closer to her. So we don't know if that was that.
The final light. I think it was.
I do too. But
She was trying to tell us that.
And then they put her in ICU.
The ICU doctor called us in, and basically she told us that the blood transfusions that we were giving her was basically artificial life support, and just prolong her agony. So we decided that morning to remove blood transfusions, and she died that afternoon.
They kept her alive so her sister could get home.
Yeah.
From Tampa to say goodbye. When she passed away, there must have been 30 people in her room.
Yeah.
All of her friends were there, and because you don't expect somebody that's 23 to pass away.
Well, at the time while all this was happening, we knew nothing about HPV. Every time I talk to somebody and tell them Kristen's story, I always say, make sure, matter of fact, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, I said, make sure your grandchildren in that case get vaccinated for HPV, because it might save their life someday. When Kristen passed away, my son Eric agreed to go through her belongings for us, because Brenda and I just couldn't do it. And he was out here in the garage sitting one day, and he came in and said, "Dad, you gotta come out here and see this." And I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "You gotta come out here and see this." I said, "Okay." So I went out to the garage, and in the center of the floor in the garage, he had a chair and all of Kristen's stuff spread all around him, and he was going through and sorting it. He says, "Look," and there was 17 journals that she had written since she was 12 years old, that I personally was not aware of. When we got the book, the prototype came in, I gave it to my friend again, asked him to look at it, and Ward said, "You ought to turn it into a book and launch it as a book." I'm going, No, nobody's gonna buy it. So we ended. Make a long story short, we ended up having a book signing at a friend of mine who owns a Christian bookstore here in town, and we had I think about 200 people show up and buy 250 copies of the book, and that's about 2,700 copies ago. And the book has become the calling card for the foundation, the Kristen Forbes E Foundation, and it's opened up all sorts of doors in order to share our story. And one of the things we did in the book was put information about HPV and the cancers it causes. Kristen's story is part of 5 women who are profiled in the documentary Someone You Love, the HPV epidemic. And we're excited about that because that also shares Kristen's story. The foundation's there to support that, and then the book's there for anybody who'd like to read her story. And we're really excited about that because Kristen's story now, in one form or another, is involved in HPV educational initiatives in 19 states.
They have found HPV on fingernail, cuticles under the fingernail. I think research is probably just on the tip of the iceberg of HPV.
Yeah. Well, it's a vaccination against cancer, and it's the only vaccine that fights cancer that's even been developed. And my philosophy about all the vaccines, no matter what they're for, they're developed by very talented researchers who, in many cases, like Dr. Brown at IU, who helped develop Gardasil, they spent their whole lives studying HPV or polio or whatever it happens to be, measles, and they've developed these vaccines to protect their children and grandchildren. And you just need to do it. I mean, don't let Dr. Google put the doubts in your mind. Go get your children vaccinated. You protect yourself, but you also protect the ones that they'll eventually love someday too.